Ways. Welcome to the Damu Kiwe Conversations. So, if you ain't hit that like button, hit that like button. It's Duse M's the dime. We got the content. Subscribe to the channel below. Salute to everybody. Appreciate all the support. Just make sure you hit that like button on your way in. It's like taking your chucks off on the front door of a gangster's home. You dig? Tupac suspect / witness. Reggie Wright Jr. grand jury testimony. We're going to get into the content. Oh, we got the content. And we're going to break it down. Hashtag ETE. Expose the exposers, but also hashtag ETE. Edifying through entertainment, man. That's whole gang. You know what I'm saying? All of them is me and I'm all of them. Yeah. Scandalous, right? So we could pull this out first, right? Let me get up out y'all way. So let's first make sure that you could make sure you know what this is, right? Make sure y'all, because he like to say it's different paperwork, you know what I'm saying? So the 103 pages for Keefe D case, right? August 31st, 2023. Duane Keefe Davis, aka Keefe D. This is it. You see the stamp right here at the top right from the clerk of the court? Yeah, this is official, right? So we're going to go and start with vegetarian pork buds. Get your fried pork buds. Yeah, we frying pork buds today. You know what I'm saying? See, all you got to do is listen to these niggas talk, bro. I'm going to keep it a buck. So, you solemnly swear, and then we'll start here where you can see his name, right? We'll start here where you can see his name, right? So, the witness, yes, ma'am. The foreperson, please state your first and last name and spell them both for the record. The witness, yes, ma'am. Reginald Lilburn Wright Jr. Reginald Lilburn Wright, I am a junior. Reginald Lilburn Wright Jr. have been first duly sworn by the forepersons of the grand jury to testify to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Testified as follows. Examination by Mr. Palal, right? Good morning, sir. How are you today, sir? Answered being Reggie Wright Jr. The attorney, the prosecution is the questions, right? On examination. Cross-examination would be for the defense or his people. So anyway, where did you grow up? I grew up initially in Los Angeles, the Watts area of Los Angeles. About the second grade, I guess that would make me about 7 or 8. My family moved to the city of Compton. Question, and in the city of Compton, what did your father do? Answer, my father was a police officer in my childhood, and he raised to the rank of captain for the city of Compton Police Department. Question, and what's your father's name? Answer, Reginald Lilburn Wright Sr. Question, and did he work for a particular unit during your time as a youth in Compton? Answer, well, initially, like most patrol officers, and he eventually, and for a long time of his career, was over the gang or an officer in the gang unit. So this is gang unit. His dad in Compton is over the gang unit. Nasty work. Oh, what a slippery slope on the side of the law. You got one on the side of the law and one living life on the other side. And they're playing both. Then later he supervised the gang and homicide unit for the city of Compton. All right. Now, when you were growing up, did you live next to other or interact with other known gang members or people who have become gang members? Yes, sir. To be honest, the main area that I grew up with was the Maparus or the Ludus Park area. However, the city of Compton is one of the unique cities. It's only 8 miles wide, and so you pretty much kind of know or have associated with a lot of other gangs and guys from other neighborhoods because of the park and recreations, which I was real active in growing up, playing little league basketball, baseball, the Pop Warner football, and basketball. Question: did you know somebody by the name of Marion Knight when you were growing up? Yes, sir, I did, right? And was there another name that Knight went by? Yes, sir, Suge Knight. And how did you know Mr. Knight? We had initially met. He's a year older than me in school grades. And so I would have been a second grader and he was a third grader, just acquaintance, just guys that grew up in the same neighborhood that was going to the same elementary school. Question: did you ultimately play ball with Mr. Knight? Answer: yes, sir. So Suge Knight and I'm sure there was a few other kids from our neighborhood, went to another school district outside of Compton Unified School District, which was Linwood Unified School District. And that's where we play high school football for the 11th grade and the 12th grade. I had went to a Catholic school my 9th and 10th grade year, a school in Los Angeles called Verbum Day High School. I thought I was going to be a basketball player. I was wider instead of taller. I was wider instead of taller. Poor Bud, get your biscuits, get your briskets. All right, I'm going to fast forward a little bit. At some point, did you join the Compton Police Department? Yes, sir. Question: and tell us about that. So I started attending Cal State University of Long Beach State College, and this is the 1984. This is in 1984. But I got hired on as a jailer while I was going to school, a civilian employee job as a civilian jailer for the city of Compton Police Department. So his daddy gives him a job. Or helps him get the job. Once I finished school, then I was allowed to, I applied to become a police officer when I was the age of 22. And in 1989, I went through the police academy, but I hadn't hired officially as a police officer until 1990. And what kind of work did you do when you were a police officer with Compton? Wow, right? That's a hell of a question. I mean, what an answer would be a hell of an answer if he wasn't lying about everything. I was a patrol police officer that worked the streets. During that time, we didn't. It was only a few officers in the gang unit. It was also, my father was a sergeant at that time, and he had 2 officers that worked under him during that time. Tim Brennan, who's no longer with us, he passed away about a year or 2 ago. And I call him Bobby, but his name is Robert Ladd, that worked under his unit. And they were pretty much the gang officers for the city. Now, at some point, while you're working in patrol, did you start moonlighting or working security in order to increase your money coming in? Yeah. After I made probation, to be honest, in 1990, when I started, I was one of the officers that worked a lot of overtime and did a lot of moonlighting because I was still young. And so I did a lot of working, but eventually started working for Death Row Records. And to understand a little bit about the moonlighting generally before we get into Death Row, was it common for patrol officers or was it allowed for patrol officers to moonlight as security when they were off duty? Answer: yes. We had a procedure a lot of us followed, but they didn't enforce it too much. But if you got caught doing something, then it got enforced. But we had to put in what's called a work permit, which meant you had to get information. You had to get permission from the police chief or maybe a commander. I forget at the time, to be honest, to be approved to work that particular job, but they allowed us to work pretty much anything that we put in for. So before we get to the death row moonlighting, what was the other kind of moonlighting you would do? Oh, okay. I worked nightclubs, comedy clubs. We had a hotel in the city of Compton. It was called the Ramada Inn. It's a casino now. And so I worked there on 1 or 2 nights a week, working in the comedy club or in the hotel in general, trucking companies. I worked on a few production sets. Question: and what were you supposed to do when you're moonlighting? What role were you doing? Answer: mainly I was there on the production sets. It was because movie sets, they like to film in Compton and do a lot of things to get actual on sets and video shoots and stuff like that. So it was mainly to protect the equipment because, you have all that expensive equipment out there. They wanted you to watch that. And also to maybe keep the gang members away because they like to pressure the production companies into putting them into the scene. They have a sense of entitlement where you in our neighborhood, one of us going to be in there representing, in this set or this shoot. Hey, look, bro, do you notice the disdain? This is just a quick assessment. The disdain in which he talks about gang members feeling a certain type of entitlement. Niggas put their sweat, blood, and tears into it. I'm talking about the ones that, really, really kept it G. You know what I'm saying? Nigga lived up to that code of ethics and move on with their life, advance into their life. Very few. But for those that do, of course they sacrifice and put their life on the line. Why wouldn't? Imagine you trying to go set up a business. Fuck some gangster shit. Set up some business in Koreatown. How much support you think you're going to get? Chinatown. How much support you going to get? Everybody practice black social economics but us. And that's kind of like part of the problem. We allow anybody come into our community and sell us products. We're consumers, generating $1.7 trillion a year. That's bigger than most economic, the most national economies, international economies. But anyway, let's get back to the content. But he's just a broken slave psychologically. So, niggas is pressing that. You see, Training Day is a good example of that. You're not going to make no money over here in our territory, and we not included. Now, were you familiar with the area gang members at the time, and were they familiar with you? Answer: our police department was only about 130 to 160 units. Squad. My father, Reggie Wright Jr., was actually real popular in the city, and so I was little Reggie. And I kind of wanted to be like him, like my father, and into the gang initially. Later, not initially, I was a little different. But eventually, yeah, that grew where I was kind of known as well with a lot of the gangs and gang members in the city. Question: now, you had mentioned death row. Before we talk about what you did at death row, can you tell us what death row actually was? Answer: Death Row Records was a record label that had some 1 or 2 R&B singers on it, but mainly were gangster rap music. Question: and to your knowledge, who ran Death Row Records? Answer: Suge. Well, Marion Hugh Knight is his name, but we call him, or I refer to him really as Suge Knight. He was the CEO of the company. Question: and what would you call him when you interacted with him? Answer: Suge. Question: Suge? Yeah. So we could just call him Suge. Answer: okay. Question: so did there ever come a point where the idea of you moonlighting for Suge came up? Question. It eventually happened in like 1994. Question. And how did that come about? Answer. Well, my father, Reggie Wright Sr., had got some intel. Wait, hold the fuck up, man. Damn! This nigga pork butt beginnings with death row started because Reginald Wright Sr. had got some intel. Some intel. The head of the gang unit got some intel about Suge Knight, right? That's some guys that were working for him because he was instrumental. May have been a smart move finding out later, but at that time, hiring guys that were just getting out of prison and giving them jobs. So they done got some intel that Suge is hiring guys that just got out of prison and he's giving them jobs. That's a problem. How dare you give jobs to them gang members? Have them protecting them stars. We the biggest gang. Compton Police Gang Unit. And by saying you mean Suge was hiring people just out of prison and giving them jobs. So that's the intel being clarified, what the intel was. And the intel was about Suge hiring people just out of prison. Yes, sir. That's the answer. This nigga Reggie a piece of shit. Yes, sir. So they start off the gate working their angle. The police. Reggie fucks with the police. Y'all don't remember him bragging that to me? I'm going to go clip that, man. We're going to be flaming pork butt ass up. We're going to have that one. I fucks with the police. We're going to run that clip. But yes, sir, that we had grew up with and from the city of Compton and other cities. Yeah, I could say other places as well, Long Beach and the Los Angeles area. But he was real instrumental in doing that. That was a big thing that we wanted to do or was proud of, to be honest. So now you get, and so my father got some intel that a few of the guys that was working for Suge were planning on coming after him and extorting him, robbing him for money. So they heard that some of the Bloods is supposed to. So who is this informant? Where did y'all get this information from? Because I don't know about no power rules robbing Suge. He knew he and I, even till today, he knew he and I had a relationship, and he told me, hey, I need you to reach out and get a hold of Suge. To this day, I don't remember how I did it, but I know I eventually got to him and we met, the three of us. So his dad is in on the meeting. Now, don't forget, Jimmy Iovine is telling Suge, oh, you need to hire some real police, planting that seed, urging him towards that so that he can line them up. You control security. You control everything. The military is the muscle. It's the might. You know what I'm saying? So they understand that concept. So they strategically place these police around them to keep an eye on the niggas in the field. You know what I'm saying? Veggie being one of them. So that's how he look up and bring Suge into them death row and telling him that they got some intel that the power rules was going to rob him. And so when you say the three of us, who are you talking about? Me, myself, Reginald Sr., and Mr. Knight, or Suge Knight. And what happened at this meeting? Answer. Pretty much him saying, man, some of the guys that you have working for you are planning on maybe, robbing you and taking advantage of you for some money. That he had got this information. He laughed it off. Suge laughed. Oh, man, they all happy, They won't do nothing to me. I ain't worried about that. But that's why you all need to be over there working with me, looking out. Myself, I had just recently had a traffic accident. This is not why I'm like this currently. So he had previous history of having disabilities and severe injuries. He's kind of uncoordinated, unorthodox. But don't let him slay you in because you thinking that he's Forrest Gump. This nigga is working with the arch deceivers, nigga. This is not why I'm like this currently. And I had messed up my right ankle. So, and plus I was 27, 26 years of age. It was in the mid 90s. The atmosphere and everything was what I wasn't married. I wanted to be around it for lack of a better word. So he liked being around it because he finally getting some pussy. You know what I'm saying? It's fair to say it's a very, at that time, gangster rap was taking off, particularly in Compton. Fair to say? Answer, yes, sir. Question. And with that, brought a lot of money, girls, and all the things associated with fame. Answer, correct. Question. And I mean, I sit on the 50-yard line of the Super Bowl, stuff that I hadn't done, just for being a cop that I was exposed to. Question. So it's fair to say you were attracted to the lifestyle that your acquaintance Suge Knight had developed. Yes, sir. Suge taught this nigga a new lifestyle. Pork butt. Suge taught you a new lifestyle. And you had the motherfucking galls to raise your voice and speak in vain of a nigga that fed you. It's some nasty work. And so did your father decide to work for Death Row Records? Answer. He right there told him I can't do that. The position I'm in. To be honest, most of the guys that's working for you, I'm trying to investigate. Investigating them on open cases right now. I'm trying to put them in jail. I wouldn't do that. Hey, look, I'm trying to lock up all the mob niggas that you giving jobs to. You giving niggas these jobs. I got a problem with you giving them that money. But you can give that money to my son. You know what I'm saying? I can't do it. I'm investigating them. But remember, he came saying he had intel about them. They running the play on Suge from the get-go. Jimmy, Reggie Wright Sr., and Pork Butt running the play from the get-go. Think they fangs into him. So your father was a hard no when it came to answer. Yeah, it was a hard no. It was like, however, he even told him that I wasn't even ready for it, to be honest. And then Suge told him, man, Reggie Pork Butt, man, that nigga ain't ready for no shit like that. Nigga, we on some gangster shit. Death Row Records, nigga. That nigga ain't ready. And he recommended a lieutenant. So if you knew that Reggie Jr. wasn't ready, why would you give him that job and put your golden calf artist under his care? This awkward nigga Matilda the Hun, Pizza the Hun, body having ass nigga. So his dad recommended a lieutenant that had an ownership in a security company that he knew. That Suge knew his, some family ties to that and said, you might want to talk to him, which he did. His name was Danny Sneed, and he was a lieutenant. And he eventually was the boss as far as putting paperwork and contacting a security company, which was a private security company called Code 4 Security. Nigga, Code 4 Security. Nigga, that's going to be on the thumbnail, nigga. Code 4 Security, nigga. That shit sound like a federal op, nigga. Nigga, this shit for the get-go got federal vibes, nigga. Nigga, they hired a private security company called Cold Fold Security and having them kind of do stuff where I was like the street supervisor or whatever, where I would always be with them when they needed like special events or they went places. It wasn't like an everyday bodyguard thing. It was just being there at a video shoot or when they go to MTV Awards or something like that. So I think we skipped a step. So you ultimately decide that you would moonlight for Suge in Death Row. Answer, yes, sir. Okay. And despite your father thinking it wasn't the greatest idea, you decided you wanted to be part of it. Answer, well, to be in charge of it. Someone else was in charge. Question. And then, so at this point, you're moonlighting, like you were mentioning, bodyguarding for Suge every now and again, going to events at that point. Answer, yes, sir. Question. At some point, do you suffer another physical injury that causes you to resign from the Compton PD? Yes, sir. So pork butt lies under oath, right? What he's not mentioning is that Compton PD came out with a declaration, or was it the mayor declaration, saying that they can no longer work with Death Row Records. They can no longer be moonlighting with Death Row Records. And he just lied right here under oath. So, can you just tell us briefly what that injury was? Answer, yes. I had a traffic accident where I re-injured the right ankle that I had where I couldn't. My ankle would just swell up just by standing on it for an hour or two. Damn, nigga, you had problems like that in your 20s, nigga. Nigga, you been whooped. That nigga whooped, nigga. And so I knew at that point I wasn't capable, when the city also knew I wasn't capable of being a patrol officer for the city of Compton, anymore. Question. So do you take a medical retirement from the Compton PD? Answer, yes, sir. And then after you take the medical retirement for Compton PD, what do you do? I then become really more involved with Death Row Records security and also open my own private security company. Question. And I'm sorry, about what month and year did you resign? I resigned it didn't become official until about 1996. However, January of 1996. However, I was off about a year, going through that whole process. And my company in that probably started in April of 1995, where I was more around. Question. Okay. So there's like a bureaucratic process that takes place for when you kind of make that decision to where it becomes official at Compton Police Department for the retirement. Going through the workers' comp and all of that, it took about a year. Question. But in April of 95, you're working on setting up Right Way. What was the name of that? Protective Services. Right Way Protective Services. And that was your security company? Answer, yes, sir. And who was the primary client for Right Way? Answer, Death Row Records. Question. And what would you do for Death Row Records? Answer, I had a security guard at the office space that they had. I had two at a recording studio that they had. And whenever any of their artists went out on promotional event or stuff like that, I had either one or two security officers with them. Snoop Dogg, who was a popular or the biggest rap artist on the label, and Dr. Dre at the time, those two. Dre pretty much only used my security when he went publicly. However, Snoop had two guys with him at all times because he had just went through a situation of his own with a case. Question. Okay, so let's break it down a little bit. So you had security at the office space. Where was the office space? Let me wet my whistle with some coffee, man. This is the gangster Johnny Cockroach, nigga. Not Johnny Cochran, but Johnny Cockroach, nigga. We're going to get back into the work, y'all. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you ain't already done it. This is Pork Butt on the Stand. Grand Jury, Keefe D. The office space at that time, well, we went through 3 during this period, but on Wilshire and Westwood, the Murdoch Plaza is what it was called. And then we had an office, 9171, which was the Larry Flint building on Wilshire. And then later on, but that came after 96, a building 8200 Wilshire. That was the headquarters or the office space for the people that were really the professional people. I call them like the staff, the PR person, the art department. The accounting firm was pretty much outside, but we had later on had an on-site bookkeeper, a receptionist, Suge Knight's assistant. So people who weren't necessary talent on the answer, yes, sir. So he always acts like he know what question you're gonna ask. Slow down. So he's already started his spinning tactics. He's already trying to cut them off and throw them off. He interrupts the question. So people who weren't necessary talent on the answer, yes, sir. Question. So you had an office space where you had, the more 9 to 5 workers and the professionals, the staff, that type of thing. Answer. Yes, sir. Question. And then you had the studio where more record producers, artists would go to, create the music for Death Row Records. Answer. Yes, sir. And that was in Tarzana, California, a studio called Can-Am. Can-Am is what it's called, recording studios in Tarzana, California. Question. And you said there would be security there. You also mentioned a couple of the best known artists at this time, and we're talking about 95 right now. Answer, yes, sir. On Death Row Records, which was Snoop Dogg. Answer, Snoop Dogg. Question, and proper name, Calvin Broadus. Answer, yes, sir. And then you had Dr. Dre as well. Yes, sir, Andre Young. Question, and also a huge artist at the time. Is that fair to say? Answer, yes, sir, and producer. And he was also the co-owner. Question, okay, he was also the co-owner? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and then would Suge have regular security with him? Answer, I would be with him a lot on the other time, probably at that point about 60% of his life, of his day at that point, but not 100%. But I wouldn't call myself security because he was a lot bigger than me, a lot stronger than me. But I would be with him. But he also had somewhat of an entourage, which was like homeboys that would be with him that, maybe 3 or 4. So when he rode, he would generally be by himself in the car, but it will always be about 85 to 90% of his life, maybe 2 other people with him. So that's very, very telling. You know what I'm saying? So, question. Now, you had talked about homeboys. I assume you're talking about people who were affiliated from the neighborhood. Answer. Yes, sir. The gentlemen that I spoke of that had just got out of prison, that he may have given jobs to and stuff like that, generally were those types. Listen how he separates himself from being homies or friends with these guys. This nigga cold nigga, man. Question. And what kind of did Suge himself associate with a particular neighborhood? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. What's that? Answer. Initially, the bigger one is called Eastside Paru. So Eastside. But the older gentlemen in the neighborhood where we grew up were Ludus Park, Paru. And then it broke off to the smaller sides. The 4 or 5 streets in our area that we grew up, they called themselves Mob Pirus. Mob, M-O-B, Pirus, P-I-R-U. So he puts him automatically as a mob Paru, right? In case he come try to help Keefe D. Did the mob stand for anything? Answer, yes, sir. What does it stand for? Member of the Bloods. Question. So it's fair to say that Mob Paru was a blood-affiliated gang? Answer, yes, sir. So I have to ask, so you're former police. Your father is head of the gang unit, and you're working security and hanging out with Mr. Knight? Answer, yes. Question. And then Mr. Knight also has around him active Mob Paru members and is also affiliated with Mob Paru himself. Answer, yes, sir. Question, how does that work? Well, number one, because contrary to what people believe, especially back then, they had a little bit of respect for police. Now the kids hate the police, but back then, well, not Whack 100 is grown and he love them. Crip Cop grown and he love them. But back then, they kind of had a little, this is the police telling you that they was being the ops, even the kids, right? But you got these niggas supporting them. This is the world in 2025. But back then, they kind of had a little respect. So it wasn't like we were bosom buddies or hanging or anything, but I was also their childhood friend. Most of them I knew really before I knew Suge. We all went to school, the same junior high schools. Now, we didn't go to the same high school because they went to Compton Unified School District and I was at Linwood Unified School District. But we all knew each other. I don't want to take a lot of credit for it, but I got to really say it was because of the relationship or maybe the fear that they have my father, Reginald Sr., that they knew, if something happened or was disrespectful to Reginald Sr., something like that, then he would bring more law down on them or a sterner hand down than maybe me being retired and not so high on the totem pole. But I really do believe they had a respect for him because he was really the type of cop that was for community policing, in my opinion. And for a lot of his, his chief and all of them would attest to that. He was different. We learned later in life in law enforcement, you got to be more community oriented, where in the early 90s, police was a little different, in my opinion. So he's saying that they befriending them to get the intel and lock these niggas up. They don't want to. They want to make it appear as if they're more community oriented. You're getting the information from and working to lock these niggas up the whole time. You already told us your dad got the intel, so he's saying you and you sink your claws in the shit. So part of it is that your dad and you grew up in the neighborhood, so you were known to all of the folks in the neighborhood. Pretty much, yes. Question. And then also the fact that your dad was a lieutenant in the gang unit in Compton may have had an effect on how people treated you as well. Answer. That's how I perceived it. Yes, sir. Question. All right. So as part of being security for Suge and Death Row or running the security for Death Row, did you become aware of a rivalry with Bad Boy Records? Yes, sir. Question. Can you tell me about that rivalry? So at this point, it's clear that Reggie is cooperating. You know what I'm saying? He's listed Suge as a gang member. This man is a businessman. Where he grew up, and who his friends and village is who his friends and village is. And he rep his shit. Cool. But that nigga ain't out there on no gang banging shit. Nigga, this nigga got an office on Wilshire. Nigga, he done partnered with Jimmy Iovine, nigga. And it worked for urban music, nigga. Suge was the first to do that. But this is the narrative they're trying to spin on Suge to the Keefe D grand jury. So let's get back to it. Wet my whistle again, man. All right, so What I really believe, and it's kind of a little story. So initially, Suge Knight and the owner of Bad Boy Records, which is Sean Puffy Combs, they had a decent relationship, a working relationship, even though he was from New York and Death Row was based in Los Angeles. But New York was kind of shown where the big record labels were. But New York was kind of known where the big record labels were. Even though our record label was based in Beverly Hills, that kind of was over us, which was Interscope Records. But their parent company was in New York as well. So we went to New York about, I can say from 95 when I came around, we probably was in New York at least 8 to 10 days of a month out that way. So they had a decent relationship. And so Suge allowed them to use some sample songs from this album that he had called The Chronic. Okay, I'm just going to break that down a little bit. So you would go to New York as security with Death Row Records and Suge quite a bit during this 95 time? Answer, yes. And it was mainly on business trips. And so that often it would be mainly just myself, Suge, usually a female companion and maybe two of his homeboys. They were very questioned. And he talked about Suge giving samples to Puff. Can you explain to us what that means? Answer, yeah. Sample songs are generally songs that have been out already that were pretty much successful that artists like to put in there to make us think of, or for some reason it's like they that had already been out and been successful, allow another rapper or artist to come up and use that song. Question. So is it like the beats? It would be the same beat or same music or melody on that song. And then you would lend that beat or melody to another rapper and they would rap their own rhymes over it. Correct, sir. Question. So what you're saying is Suge has such a good relationship with Mr. Combs that he would even lend out or let him have the beats and music from a successful record so that Mr. Combs can use that for his artists. Answer, yes, sir. Okay. And is it fair to say that typically somebody charges for something like that? Answer, charges a fair amount or deny it. Don't allow it to happen. Question. So to you, what was that indicative of the relationship between Suge and Puffy at the time? Answer. So they had a great working relationship, in my opinion, at that time. Question. So did that change at all? Answer. And so now Suge, there's this rapper by the name of Tupac Shakur. Yeah, Tupac. Well, yeah, I guess the name is Tupac Shakur, right? And he's in prison. Where is he in prison? In New York. And he needs some financial help. Initially, that's all Suge. His wife at the time reached out to Suge and asked Suge for some assistance. Whose wife reached out to Suge? Tupac. So Tupac's wife reached out to Suge Knight for financial assistance. Yeah, to say, hey, I'm kind of having it rough in here. Some of my people out here needed some help, and can you help me out? Because they had dealings in the past. And Suge was like, okay, Suge, myself, David Kenner, we went to the prison. And who's David Kenner? He was he was really an attorney, the company's attorney. But he kind of had a lot of business manager for Death Row. So now you already got a conflict of interest because the company's attorney is also trying to manage these artists. Oh, David Kenner, this is nasty work. David Kenner, this is nasty work. So, hold on. Let me see. We back. Sorry, I had to pause for a brief moment. But we could get back to the content. Let me make sure y'all can see that. I think we're on page 37. 37. You know the dig? And so help me and you can help me out, because they had dealings in the past. And Suge was like, okay. So Suge, myself, David Kenner, we went to the prison. And who's David Kenner? He was he was really an attorney, the company's attorney, but he kind of had a lot of business manager for Death Row. So that was the conflict of interest we spoke of. Question. So he had a law degree, but he was acting as a business manager for Death Row. Answer. For Suge Knight, yeah. They were kind of like, they had a close relationship. Question. So you three are going out to New York. What was the purpose of going out to New York? Answer. Initially, he was just going out there to check on him and talk to him. Talk to who? Answer. Mr. Shakur. Question. Okay. Answer. And so during that conversation, it came up that, hey, he's doing bad. His record label, who was also our distributor, Interscope Records, pretty much was done with him and felt like they had gave him too much money, advanced him too much money, and he was in the hole. And he didn't have the #1 album on the charts at the time, but they was like, hey, because all your legal bills and stuff like that, we're not giving you any more money. So one thing we need to note, and let me get my pen, is Jimmy Iovine, while Tupac is in jail with a #1 album, because of attorney fees, a platinum album, Me Against the World, my favorite Tupac album, right? While he got this, Jimmy Iovine is arguing that he's still in the red and has him recouped. Imagine selling 1 million records and you haven't recouped. That's bullshit. They cooking the books on them. So it's already starting in the hole or whatever, right? Now, there go my pen and shit right there. Hold on. So now, Interscope is saying, Interscope is refusing to pay Pac any more money. So they got a dispute. He's in jail and they locked up on his money. You find a lot of even your friends try to do that you did business with when you get incarcerated. Sad reality of going to jail. So, and this is what Mr. Shakur was relaying to you and Mr. Knight. I wasn't there, Mr. Knight, but what I know from hearing Mr. Kenner and Mr. Knight talk about when they came back to the car while I was in the car, Mr. Palau. And so I'm just going to instruct the jury that this is for effect on listener and to explain the subsequent actions of both Mr. Wright Jr. and Mr. Knight. This is not for the truth of the matter asserted. Does anybody have any issue with that? Seeing no hands by Mr. Palau. Question. All right. So you became aware that Mr. Shakur was having financial problems and needed financial assistance while he was in prison in New York? Answer. Yes, sir. And did Mr. Knight did you observe Mr. Knight make a decision to do anything to assist Mr. Shakur? Answer. He came back in the car and he said, hey, and I heard him get on the phone with Jimmy Iovine, who was the president or CEO of Interscope Records, and they had conversations about how can I get him, get him some money, and can I assume responsibility for his contract because he was still under contract with Interscope Records. They eventually made a deal where they assigned his right to Suge Knight, and Suge Knight bought his mother a house while he was in prison and was giving him financial support. This is between May and June of 1995. So during this time, they trying to figure out, David Kenner assured Mr. Knight that he possibly could get Mr. Shakur out on appeal bond. And eventually they worked out a deal where they got $1.5 million up to get him out on an appeal bond. But then there was a music award show. Question. So before we get to the music award show, so it was your understanding, having been around Mr. Knight all this time and dealing with him 60% of his life, essentially during this time? Answer, yes. Question. He interrupts him again like he knows what the final question is going to be. That's one of his tactics to deflect line and train of thought. That Mr. Knight obtained and put up about 1.5 million as an appeal bond to release Mr. Shakur from custodial status in the New York prison. Answer, yes, sir. Question, and now I'm going to answer. And it was a combination of other entities that also put up money. So it wasn't just Death Row that put up the 1.5. It was other entities. Question, yeah. Answer, okay. Question, so during this time while Mr. Shakur is still in prison, did a public incident occur that demonstrated some kind of rivalry between Mr. Knight and Mr. Combs of the Bad Boy Records? Answer, yes, sir. So what happened? Mr. Shakur is still not out of prison, but things are beginning to work. You know how the justice system works, being assured that the wheels are turning. There was a big urban hip-hop music award show called the Source Awards. It was a big popular magazine at the time. They had an award show in New York, and Mr. Knight came out there, and he had his artists performing. And he put up a cardboard picture of Mr. Shakur in one of the jail cells because he had all we consider it like death row, all his artists on death row, which means an inmate. And so he had them in a cell, and that was announcing to everybody that Mr. Shakur is now with death row. People not really catching it. Question. And again, you know a lot more than, most people do. So to explain it, is there a performance at this award show? Answer, I'm sorry, yes. So they were performing. And that's why they had them on the stage, because each one of them came out of the cell when they performed their part of the song. Question. And so as part of the set, there's a display with what looks a jail, like a bunch of jail cells. Answer, yes, sir. Question. And then on one of the displays is Mr. Shakur being painted, or answer, he cuts him off again. It was like a cardboard cutout. Question. Okay. Of him in one of the jail cells. Answer. Yeah. So people probably saw it. Didn't know, but I know it, because I'm involved. What that was supposedly meant. Oh, question, yeah. What that was supposedly meant, Mr. Knight gets up on the stage. He wins an award for Best Executive of the Year or Best Album of the Year, something like that. And he gets up there and publicly makes a statement disrespecting Puffy Combs. So are you aware whether or not this award show is televised or not televised? It was. Question. So Mr. Wright is on stage at this award show that's being televised, and it's fair to say that he is taking verbal shots at Mr. Combs? Yes. And was at the beginning then of the rivalry? So that night, we go to an after party, and Mr. Combs approached Mr. Knight at this club called The Tunnel in New York. Were you there? I was there, standing right there. And he approached him like, hey, what's going on? Why you dissing me in front of everybody like that? And they had heated, words or exchange of words. Where we was at. All right. And they walked away. Everybody went, their own separate ways. So this is August. And the reason why I know the date is because, my memory and stuff, because it's around my birthday, which is August the 5th. So it was like either the 3rd or the 6th of August when this took place. So then Mr. Knight goes to Atlanta. I wasn't with him. Thank God I missed the plane. But question. So since you weren't there, let me ask it this way. After Mr. Knight returned, Did you see Mr. Knight after he returned from Atlanta? Answer, oh, from Atlanta, or you mean New York? Question, from Atlanta. So after this incident you're talking about, did you see him after that? Yes, sir. Did you come to learn that one of Mr. Knight's close associates was killed in Atlanta? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and did you come to learn from Mr. Knight who he blamed for his close associate getting killed in Atlanta? Yes, sir. Question, who did Mr. Knight blame for his associate getting killed in Atlanta? Answer, a friend that was close associate of Mr. Combs, Puffy Combs. Question, so Mr. Knight communicated to you that he believed Mr. Combs was responsible, if not directly, indirectly, for the murder of his good friend in Atlanta? Answer, yes, sir. And Mr. Knight was in, so they're talking about the murder, unaliving of Big Jake, right? So now they're saying a friend of Combs did it, not actually Puffy Combs. They didn't say Puffy Combs' entourage. So this is a real reach of what Reggie and them are trying to connect all of this stuff to a hip hop beef. This is the narrative they're trying to run with. East Coast, West Coast hip hop beef. So, and Mr. Knight was in Atlanta when this occurred. Yes, sir. So it is fair to say, based on your observations, this only escalated the rivalry between Bad Boy Records and Death Row Records. Answer, yes, sir. Question, as security, would you have to, go to events where Bad Boy may have also do security for Death Row, where Bad Boy would also be there after the Atlanta incident? Okay, that would have been my responsibility. Question, yes. Answer, generally, like I said, it was an early morning flight. I missed the flight, so I generally was supposed to have been there. People always tell me it was God looking out for me by keeping me there. But there's a little bit more I wanted to explain to the mindset of why the rivalry started. Question, okay, is it from your personal knowledge? Answer, okay, just what I know from the industry, but I don't know. So this is a whole lot of speculation. This is a whole lot of hearsay he's trying to muddy the water with in the grand jury. Okay, did you ever, let me ask you this, did you ever have a conversation with Mr. Shakur about whether or not he had any bad feelings towards Bad Boy Records? Answer, after his release from prison, not while he was in prison. Question, okay, so when was Mr. Shakur released from prison? Answer, October the 12th, 1995. Question, and at that point, did Mr. Shakur become a recording artist for Death Row Records? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and was he somebody now whose security you were responsible for? Answer, I was responsible. Had security with him every day while he was out in public. Question, and was it you specifically or someone you employed that? Answer, I hired. I had about 4 or 5 different security guards on him daily. Different ones daily from that time, actually until his death, to be honest. Question, okay, now with this escalating situation with Bad Boy Records, did you become aware of whether or not Bad Boy Records had used any Compton gangs for security when they were in LA, Southern California region? Answer, yes, sir. So Reggie is admitting that he knew Bad Boy was using Compton gangs for security when they were in LA. That Bad Boy and Biggie and Diddy were using Compton gangs. This is what he's alleging, right? He knew this back then. Question, and based on your observation, what gangs did Bad Boy employ as their security while in Southern California? Answer, gentlemen from the Compton, Southside Crips. Question, okay, and were you familiar with the Southside Crips from growing up in Compton? Answer, knew of the area, but not from growing up, other than playing baseball with them, knowing they were from the area, but not until I became a police officer or started working in the jail that I learned the difference, to be honest. Question, and so you became more familiar with Southside after you were an adult and working jails and working in patrol? Answer, that would be correct. And so how did you become aware that Bad Boy Records was using Southside Crips as their security in Southern California? Answer, streets talking, but mainly saw them at a few events with them in large numbers. Question, okay, and you had to go back now to when Mr. Shakur was released. Would he talk to you about the animus, or is that the animosity? The animus he had towards Puff Daddy or Sean Combs and his primary recording artist, Christopher Wallace? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and do you remember what Christopher Wallace's rap name was? Answer, he have a few, but Biggie Smalls, Notorious B.I.G., Big Papa. Question, so without getting into the details, is it fair to say that Mr. Shakur had really strong feelings about Mr. Combs and Mr. Wallace? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and was that ever reflected on any of Mr. Shakur's music? Answer, music and even portrayed in music videos that he did during that time period. Question, are you familiar with a song called Hit 'Em Up? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and is it fair to say that in that song and in that music video, Mr. Shakur goes out of his way to insult Mr. Combs and Mr. Wallace in the most graphic and explicit ways possible? Answer, it's still one of the top 3 most diss songs talked about in the hip-hop community as far as rap label and disrespect to another label and their family members. Question, I mean, it's fair to say that Mr. Shakur talks about having sex with Mr. Wallace's wife? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and talking about killing members of the Bad Boy record label? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and as a crew? Question, the record label, the staff, and significantly anybody who was a part of that crew, as you mentioned? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and would you include as part of that crew, meaning anybody who associated with Bad Boy Records? Answer, yes, sir. Question, now, as part of hip-hop culture, as you're aware, you have mentioned that it's still talked about as one of the diss records. Is dissing or disrespecting other artists part of hip-hop culture, if you're aware? It doesn't happen as often as you would think, but it does happen, yes, sir. Question, and we had Edie Malcolm Greenridge testify in this case as well. So Edie Amin testified in the Keefe D trial grand jury. Were you aware of Malcolm Greenridge being associated with Tupac Shakur? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and was he part of that particular song, Hit 'Em Up? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and was he also, to your knowledge, was he a close associate of Mr. Shakur? Answer, I believe so. Yes, sir. Yeah, I know so. Yes, sir. Question, now I want to get to another award show, the Soul Train Music Awards in 1996. Were you at the Soul Train Awards? Answer, yes, sir. Where was the Soul Train Awards? Answer, it was at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles, California. Shrine Auditorium. That's in the hood. Question, and to your knowledge, was the Bad Boy record label also expected to be at the Soul Train Awards? Answer, yes, sir. Question, can you tell us about what you experienced leading up to and at the Soul Train Awards? We had there was some back and forth regarding, who was going to open up the award show, where Mr. Cornelius elected to go with Biggie Smalls to open up the show. So Mr. Knight pulled Mr. Shakur from performing at that particular show. However, he convinced Mr. Knight to have Mr. Shakur come and that he would be very happy, were his exact words that I heard him tell him. And so, was there a decision made to actually attend the Soul Train Awards? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and this is in March of 96? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and so how many people arrive or go to the Soul Train Awards from Death Row? Answer, on that particular night or day, we brought about 50 to 60 associates. Question, and by 50 to 60 associates, I assume some of them are working for you and Right Way Protective Services. Is that right? Answer, actually, that particular night, we only had about 2 of my guys there. Question, so then who make up the 50 to 60? Answer, a few artists, maybe about 8 to 10 of them, and the others were gang members for the Compton area, not just the Mob Paru, but from Paru areas in the city of Compton. Question, so all blood sets? Parus is what we call them in Compton. Okay, Paru sets. Yes, sir, which is the same as bloods. Question, is it communicated to you how you are going to enter the award show, whether it's the front or back, or how does that work? Answer. So our intent initially was to all go in through the back gate, a private entryway, you know, the back where they have motorhomes and where the artists come out, like their little dressing rooms and stuff like that, and very limited parking space. But I got a heads up and I played a little double agent that day. He admits to playing double agent, that they were planning on being disruptive at the award show. Question, and by they, you mean the members of the Parus who were showing up or planning to on showing up at the Soul Train Awards? Answer, yeah. So here you got Pork Butt, who is supposed to be protecting, and his job is to protect the death row artist and Suge Knight. He only has 2 security with him, but he still shows up as if that's what his focus is. But he has word and intel that they want to stir something up at the award show. These Paru bloods that's with him, about 50 to 60 deep, right? And he plays double agent. He can shift gears on you in mid-operation, nigga. The police just comes out. Once a cop, always a cop. And so I knew the head of security at the shrine, and I tipped them off to what was about to happen and to only allow a limited amount of people in, which they did. Question. And so who was allowed in through the artist entrance or the back entrance? Answer. Mr. Knight, Mr. Shakur, and he had about 3 or 4 members of the Outlaws, which would be Mr. Edie, Malcolm Green, I believe. Question. Malcolm Greenridge? Answer. And 2 other members. And there was a singing artist named Danny Boy. They were in a Hummer with Mr. Knight. Myself and Frank Alexander, which was Mr. Shakur's primary security, was trailing behind him, and I was riding in the passenger seat of Mr. Alexander's vehicle. Question. I'm going to fast forward in this event a little bit. At some point, was there a confrontation between Death Row Records and the Bad Boy Records during or backstage of the show? Yes, sir. So what happened was like I said, they elected to have Biggie Smalls or Mr. Wallace to perform. And they were leaving. They were planning on leaving probably because they knew that Death Row was coming. I don't know, but they were planning on leaving. As we were going into the auditorium or exiting our vehicles to go into the auditorium, they were coming out. So I guess it was bad timing. And then there was an argument that followed with a little gunplay or a pointing. Question. So who was the argument between? Answer. Mr. Shakur was the most vocal. Mr. Wallace, and then his entourage. Question. And you speak about Mr. Wallace's entourage there. Were there any members you had mentioned earlier, Southside Crips, have been doing security for Bad Boy? Were there any members of the Southside Crips with Mr. Wallace during this incident? Answer. Yes. There were approximately 10 to 15 gentlemen that were exiting, and I noticed about 8 to maybe 9 that I have known from the city of Compton, you know, from my law enforcement days. And I did notice one particular individual. Question. And what particular individual did you notice? Answer. Mr. Davis, Mr. Keefe Davis, or Duane Davis. Question. And does Mr. Davis go by a nickname that you're aware of? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. What nickname is that? Answer. Keefe D. Question. And is it fair to say that you knew Mr. Davis to be a member of the Southside Compton Crips during this time period? Answer. Yes, sir. I mainly knew him as a gang member, but mainly knew him because he's a major drug player in our city. Question. Okay. And so he was somebody that it was common knowledge within your city that Mr. Davis wasn't necessarily a shooter as much as somebody who dealt in narcotics. Answer. Correct. Mr. Palau, and ladies and gentlemen, just for your edification, this This information is being offered not to talk about propensity of or Mr. Davis's character, but to meet the elements of the crimes associated with the gang enhancement in this case. Does anybody have any problem following that instruction? Seeing no hands by Mr. Palal. Question. All right. So I'm showing you grand jury exhibit number 2. It's on the monitor. Do you recognize the person depicted in grand jury exhibit number 2? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. Who was that? Answer. Keefe Davis. I knew it as his moniker, but I believe his correct name was Duane Keefe Davis. Question. You knew him as Keefe D? Answer. Keefe D. Yes. All right. You had mentioned there was a gunplay during this incident. It's fair to say that you did not see Mr. Davis with a firearm during that event? Answer. No, I didn't see him with a firearm. Question. And nobody actually shot a firearm during this event? Answer. No, just was gentlemen brandished the weapon. And gentlemen question. And gentlemen with the associated with the Bad Boy record label or with the Death Row record label? Answer. Definitely Bad Boy record label. He was standing next to in the area with Mr. Davis and in the area of Mr. Wallace. Question. Okay. So can you tell us how that happened and what exactly happened? Answer. So as we were, like I said, getting out of the vehicles, exiting the vehicles to go in, they were coming out. Immediately, Mr. Shakur noticed them and he started yelling towards them. At that time, I'm next to Mr. Shakur and the gentleman brought the gun out of his waist, but he never raised the gun, but I did. Question. So one of the people associated with Bad Boy Records brandished a firearm, but did not point it at anybody. Answer. Correct. Question. And then what did you do as a result? Because you're security, right? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. What did you do as a result of seeing this? Answer. I jumped out of the car and I was pretty much on top of it, in my words, and I pointed my gun towards the gentleman with the gun and begged him not to point that gun and raise the gun. Question. And did the situation ultimately resolve it without shots being fired? Answer. Yes, sir. They took off and ran towards the streets out of the parking lot. Question. Did Mr. I'll strike that. All right. Now I'm going to fast forward to Vegas. Answer. Okay. Was it common for Death Row Records to come out to Vegas for Mike Tyson fights? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. Would you come out typically with Death Row Records for the Tyson fights? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. But how many fights would you say you went out to prior to this incident? Answer. 3. Question. Now, were you aware, well, leading up to this time, so we're talking about September 7th of 1996. Answer. Okay. Question. Leading up to this time between, we have the Soul Train Awards in March of 96, and now we have the Tyson fight in September of 96. Answer. Yes, sir. Question. Is it fair to say that the hostilities between Bad Boy Records and Death Row Records were still going on and maybe even increasing? Answer. It was major because of that song, The Hit 'Em Up, had been released later, not on the initial album that was released in February. It had hit the streets in about April or May, and it was making a lot of noise. Question. And then is it fair to say that during that time, as far as you know, the Southside Crips were still doing work for Bad Boy Records? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. And it's fair to say that during the time, Death Row is still affiliating itself with Mob Piru? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. Now, initially, when you go out to Vegas, what are you there responsible for the Tyson Seldon fight in September of 1996? So you know me, I like patting myself on the back and say everything other than getting the rooms and everything ready. But I was pretty much Suge's point guy or go-to guy, you know, in the streets. Like I said, not at the office, but his office, his assistants in there would pretty much communicate everything to me because it was hard to get a hold of Mr. Knight. So he gathering intel at the same time as going to Suge. He's monitoring it. This is crazy, bro. All along. But my main, a 270 confidential source for the Fed. But my main responsibility that night and my biggest concern on my plate was getting the Club 662, ready for Mr. Shakur, Mr. Knight, and the entourage and everybody to come in and get in there successfully. And we had an issue with trying to get our permits and licenses and all of that. And we were trying to be on point to have a good showing for those people involved. Question. So it's fair to say largely you were responsible for logistics and security? Yes, sir. Question. Now, of the people who were coming out to Vegas for the fight, it would be Suge. Is that fair to say? Answer, of course, yes. Questions. Mr. Shakur? Answer, yes, sir. Question. We had talked a little bit about the rap group, the Outlaws. Was it your expectation that they were coming out that weekend? Answer. A couple of them, because a couple of them was too young, and so I think only two of them came that was in the group. Question. Okay, and then, did Suge have some of his, as you called them, homeboys come out as well? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. And among those homeboys, are you familiar with somebody who went by the moniker Neckbone? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. And who's that? Answer. Roger Williams. Question. And did you know him to be a Ma Paru member? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. And then Buntry. Are you familiar with somebody who went by Buntry? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. Who's that? Answer. Alton McDonald. Question. And was he also a Ma Paru member? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. And was he also out here out here in 1996? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. September 1996. And then did you know somebody by the name of Mob James? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. And what was his true name? Answer. James McDonald. Question. And was he also out here for that weekend in 1996? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. And was he also affiliated with Mob Paru? Answer. Yes, sir. Did you know somebody by the name of Trayvon Lane? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. What was his nickname if you know? Answer. Trey or Youngster. We call him Youngster. Probably in the streets, they just referred to him as Trey. Question. Now, was he somebody he's somebody also that came out for the fight?